The third-year law student sitting at the back of municipal courtroom 6 that Friday morning had been told, on her first day of pro bono clinic, 3 things by the supervising attorney she trusted. The first was to bring 2 pens. The second was to never, under any circumstance, raise your voice in a municipal courtroom, because a raised voice was the loudest signal a person could send that they did not, in fact, have a case. And the third was, when a client came in carrying a folder, to look at the folder before you looked at the client. The folder told you, the supervising attorney had said, what the case was going to be about. The folder very often was the case. The law student's name was Marisla Quintero. She was 26, and she was watching, from the back row, a retired postal carrier named Earl Bridges walk to the rail of courtroom 6 with a folder. The folder was a faded brown accordion file. It had been, by the look of it, in service longer than Marisla had been alive. It was held together at the corner by a piece of mailing tape that had yellowed at the edges and had been carefully relabeled 3 times in a neat black pen. The label, in Earl Bridges's careful capitals, read Registration, DMV, Police Court. The corners of the folder bulged with paper. Earl Bridges was 72. He had been a U.S. postal carrier for 41 years on the same route in the south end of the city. He had retired in 2021 with a pension, a small house his wife Edith had paid off 2 months before she passed, 2 grown daughters and a granddaughter in 7th grade, a clean driving record and a green Ford Ranger he had bought new in 2014 and had taken in for every recommended service ever since. He had renewed the registration on the Ranger every year on time. He had, in 2024, renewed it 8 days before the previous registration was set to expire. He had paid the renewal fee in person at the DMV satellite office on Crawford Street. He had carried home, in the inside pocket of his jacket, a thermal printed receipt with a small barcode at the bottom. He had filed the receipt in the folder. He had also taken, on the advice of his older daughter who worked in compliance for a hospital, a clear cell phone photograph of the receipt and of the new registration card before he placed both in the folder. He had taken, on the same advice, a clear cell phone photograph of his rear license plate that same evening so that, his daughter had said, you have proof of what your plate looked like on the day the new sticker was on it. What had then happened over the following 4 months was, in some sense, a small private failure of bureaucratic plumbing, and, in another sense, a kind of compounding cruelty that the city did not, when one piece of plumbing failed, have any reliable way to stop. The DMV satellite office's 2024 renewal data had not transferred that week to the police records integration database the state had begun using the year before. The integration database had that Sunday at 3 in the morning run its weekly sweep. The sweep had found in Earl Bridges's record no current registration. The sweep had flagged the plate as expired. The flag had gone by Monday morning at 10 to every traffic and plate reader unit in the city. On Tuesday at 6:15 in the morning, Earl Bridges had driven, as he did every Tuesday, to the small diner on Crawford where he had been having coffee with 3 retired carriers from his old branch for almost 5 decades. A plate reader on a cruiser parked at the gas station across the street had flagged his plate. The patrol officer had pulled him over. Earl Bridges had handed over his license, his new registration card, and the printed receipt. The patrol officer had photocopied all 3, had let Earl go with what he had called a courtesy citation for our records, and had told him the system would update on its own. The system had not updated. The next Tuesday at 6:15 in the morning, a different patrol officer at a different intersection had flagged the same plate. He had also issued a citation. The third Tuesday, a third officer at a third intersection had issued a third citation. The fourth Tuesday, the patrol officer had told Earl that he was now showing 2 outstanding warrants from missed court dates on the previous citations, that he could either come to the station voluntarily that morning or be taken in. Earl Bridges had asked, very carefully, to please use the man's car radio to call his older daughter. The patrol officer, who had recognized in Earl Bridges the same gentle decency he had grown up with in his own grandfather, had let him. By the time Earl Bridges arrived in courtroom 6 that Friday morning, accompanied by his older daughter, his folder contained 1 DMV receipt time-stamped, 1 printed photograph of the new registration card, 1 printed photograph of the rear plate with the new sticker on it, 9 traffic citations from 9 consecutive Tuesdays, 4 warrants the citations had compounded into, the printed text of the State Administrative Code section governing the police records integration database, and a sworn 1-page letter from the DMV satellite office's supervisor, a woman named Rita Cho who had, when Earl's daughter had called her on Wednesday afternoon, taken 11 minutes to write the letter on her own initiative, on her own letterhead. attesting that the renewal had been processed on time and that the failure of the database transfer was a known and documented system error. Earl Bridges did not lay any of this out in any order in particular when he reached the rail. He simply set the folder on the rail, opened it carefully at the corner, and pulled out the supervisor's letter and the original DMV receipt and the photograph of the rear plate. He placed the 3 documents in that order face up on the rail. He turned the rest of the folder around to face the bench. He waited. The judge was Judge Marisol Castellanos. She was 63. She had been on the municipal bench for 18 years. She had grown up in a house her father, a long-haul trucker, had bought on the South End with his pension. She had paid her way through state law school working the night shift at the post office on Crawford. She had not, anyone in the building would say, forgotten any of that. Judge Castellanos lifted her glasses. She looked at the folder for a long second. She looked at Earl Bridges. She did not in that long second say anything. Then she said very evenly, "Mr. Bridges, good morning. May I see the supervisor's letter?" The bailiff carried the letter forward. Judge Castellanos read it through once. She turned it over, she read it again, she set it down, she lifted the DMV receipt, she read the time stamp, she set it down. She lifted the photograph of the rear plate, she looked at it, she set it down, she looked back at Earl Bridges. "Mr. Bridges," she said, "I see 9 citations. I see 4 warrants. I see 1 renewal receipt from the DMV satellite office on Crawford from 2024, 8 days before your previous registration expired. I see 1 signed letter from the supervisor of that office confirming the renewal and confirming the failure of the database transfer. Is there anything else in the folder you would like the court to see?" Earl Bridges said, "There's photographs of the rear of the truck on every Tuesday, ma'am. My daughter said it was a good idea to take one. I didn't want anyone to think the sticker came off." Judge Castellanos almost smiled. She did not, but she almost did. "Pass me the photographs, please, Mr. Bridges." The bailiff carried the photographs forward. Judge Castellanos looked through them one by one. There were 9 of them, 1 from every Tuesday, the green Ford Ranger parked outside the diner, the sticker visible on the plate, the date stamped by the phone on each image. She set them down. She looked back at Earl Bridges. "Mr. Bridges," she said, "may I ask how long did you carry mail?" 41 years, ma'am." "On the same route?" "Yes, ma'am, the Crawford and Drury route, the whole South End." "My father bought our house off Drury, Mr. Bridges, off Drury and 42nd, in 1973. Earl Bridges nodded once. He did not say anything. He did not have to. The number 42nd was a number he had walked past in uniform almost 6,000 times. Judge Castellanos turned to her clerk. "Clerk, please get the city clerk's office on the line. I want the chief records officer. Tell her this is Judge Castellanos and I will hold." She turned to the bailiff. "Bailiff, please walk a copy of the supervisor's letter and the DMV receipt and a printout of all 9 citations and all 4 warrants to the city attorney's office on the 3rd floor right now. Tell them I would like the assigned city attorney here in courtroom 6 in 8 minutes. Thank you." She turned back to Earl Bridges. "Mr. Bridges, we are going to take a short recess. You are not under any obligation to do anything but sit. Your daughter may sit with you. The bailiff will bring you a glass of water. Would you like a glass of water?" "Yes, ma'am, thank you." The recess was, in fact, 11 minutes. Marisol Quintero in the back row watched the entire 11 minutes without moving. She watched Judge Castellanos speak quietly into a phone for 4 minutes. She watched the clerk hand the bailiff a printed copy of the state administrative code provision Earl Bridges had brought in his folder. She watched the city attorney come in through the side door, a tired man named Park, late 40s, who had been doing municipal work for 16 years, and read the supervisor's letter and the DMV receipt at the prosecution table without ever sitting down. She watched him close his folder when he had finished and walk forward to the bench. Judge Castellanos called the court back to order. She said, "Mr. Park, have you reviewed the documents?" "I have, Your Honors." "Mr. Park, does the city contest the validity of the supervisor's letter, the DMV receipt, the photographs of the rear plate, or the documented failure of the police records integration database in this matter?" "The city does not, Your Honor." "Mr. Park, does the city contest that the 9 citations and the 4 resulting warrants in this matter were issued in error?" "The city does not, Your Honor." "Mr. Park, will the city, on the record today, withdraw the 9 citations and vacate the 4 warrants in this matter. Yes, Your Honor. Will the city, on the record today, refer this matter to the Police Records Integration System Administrator for a written corrective action describing how the citation cascade was permitted and what process the city will implement to identify and reverse other affected drivers in this database? Yes, Your Honor. Will the city, on the record today, commit that the corrective action will be filed with this court within 30 days and will be filed by the same date with the Office of the State Inspector General? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Castellanos nodded once. She lifted her pen. She spoke as evenly as she had spoken when she had asked Earl Bridges what was in his folder. On the record before the court, the 9 citations and the 4 warrants against Mr. Earl Bridges in this matter are dismissed in full. The city will withdraw them by the close of business today. The court orders the citations and warrants struck from Mr. Bridges's record. The court orders the Police Records Integration Database flag on Mr. Bridges's plate cleared today. The court orders the city to file a written corrective action within 30 days and to provide a copy of that corrective action to the State Inspector General. The court further orders that Mr. Bridges's case be referred to the city's Civil Claims Office for compensation of his out-of-pocket costs in this matter, including any towing fees, court costs, and lost wages, with the full cooperation of the city attorney's office. Mr. Bridges, you may stand. Earl Bridges stood. His daughter stood with him. He did not have anything in his hand because his folder, by then, had walked itself across the building and back. Judge Castellanos looked at him. She said, Mr. Bridges, I want to say 2 things to you on the record. The first is that the court owes you an apology for the 4 months of citations and warrants that this database failure cost you and your family. The court extends that apology on the record. The second is that the patience and care you brought to your folder and the simple decency of the supervisor at the Crawford office who took 11 minutes on a Wednesday afternoon to write you a letter on her own initiative are the only reasons this got fixed today. I would like you to thank Ms. Cho at the Crawford DMV from me when you see her next. You may go home, Mr. Bridges. We are adjourned. Earl Bridges nodded once to the bench. He turned. He walked the few careful steps to the rail. His daughter walked with him. The bailiff held the gate open. Earl Bridges set his hand, for a moment, on the rail as he passed it, the way a man sets his hand on the rail of a small bridge he has just walked across in the rain. Then he and his daughter walked together down the center aisle and out the door. Marisla Quintero did not stand up at the back row. She did, however, write down, in the small, careful handwriting she had inherited from her own grandmother, the entire 11-minute recess sequence in her notebook. She would, that night, transcribe it into the case journal her supervising attorney had asked every clinic student to keep. She would, 18 months later, when she had been admitted to the bar and was practicing at the same small civil rights firm that had taken Eduardo Salinas's case a year before, refer back to the journal entry 6 different times in 6 different filings on behalf of 6 different drivers whose plates had been similarly flagged in error and whose lives had been similarly disrupted by the citation cascade the corrective action had eventually slowly identified. It took, in fact, the entire 30-day window Judge Castellanos had ordered for the city to file the corrective action. The corrective action ran to 84 pages. Identified by reconciling DMV transfer logs against police records database flags from the preceding 18 months, 2,417 drivers whose plates had been incorrectly flagged. The city, under further court order from Judge Castellanos in 3 follow-up hearings she scheduled herself, would over the following year systematically reverse every citation, vacate every resulting warrant, and refer every affected driver to the Civil Claims Office for compensation. The corrective action would, by the Inspector General's separate review, recommend a hard fix to the integration database that prevented the weekly sweep from running on any record that had been touched by a DMV transaction in the preceding 90 days. The fix would be implemented by the following spring. Earl Bridges did not see any of that follow-up at first. He went home that Friday afternoon with his daughter. He sat on the small front porch he had repainted himself the spring before. He drank coffee. He thought about Edith. He thought about the small, careful handwriting in which his late wife had labeled the original brown accordion file when she had bought it for him in 2012. He thought, as the afternoon light fell low across the porch, about the long, quiet wait of 41 years of mail and what it had taught him about the patient persistence of paper. That Tuesday at 6:15 in the morning, for the first time in 9 weeks, He drove to the diner on Crawford and parked the green Ford Ranger and walked in. 3 retired carriers were already in the booth. One of them, the oldest of the 3, looked up and said evenly, "Earl, long time." Earl said, Yeah, it's been." He sat down. The waitress poured his coffee without asking. None of them that morning talked about it. They talked instead about the granddaughter of the oldest carrier who had just started 7th grade, and about the recent rain, and about a route that had been split up the year before that should not have been split. They drank their coffee. They paid their checks. They went home. In the corridor of Municipal Courtroom 6 that Friday afternoon, after the docket had cleared, Marisla Quintero saw the supervising attorney from her clinic standing by the elevators with 2 case folders under her arm. The supervising attorney saw Marisla first. She said, "What did you learn today, Quintero?" Marisla thought for a long moment. She said, "The folder, ma'am, the folder is the case." The supervising attorney smiled. "Good, what else?" Marisla said, "Don't mistake quiet for easy." The supervising attorney nodded, the way a teacher nods when a student has finally said back to her something the teacher had spent a long time trying to say herself. She held the elevator door open with her elbow. She said, "Come on. We've got 2 more clinics to do this afternoon. We've got people coming in." They went down. The building, in the quiet, measured way the building always had, went on doing what the building was built for. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sky was the kind of blue Earl Bridges had walked under in uniform for the better part of his life. He went home. He slept that night for 9 straight hours. He had not slept 9 straight hours since the 3rd Tuesday. He came down to the porch the next morning at 6, the way he always did, made his coffee, and watched the sun come up over the dreary rooftops the way he always had. The truck, parked at the curb, was in good order. The plate on the back was clean. The record in the file the daughter had taken to be photocopied for her own peace of mind was clear. The building, in its quiet and lawful way, had done what the building was built to do. Earl Bridges, in his quiet and lawful way, had let it.